Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Alaska in the United States. Now, if you aren't familiar with where exactly Alaska is in the world, it is an exclave of the United States, meaning that it is an area that is not bordered by the majority of the rest of the country. It is separated from the 48 United States by Canada. You can see right here by Yukon, the Yukon Territory, and British Columbia. Now, if you are a longtime viewer, you look at this border and you already know what I'm going to say. Because of this right here, Mother Nature does not make straight lines. And if you see a very straight line like this on a map, that means it was drawn there by man. And they draw a straight line because there is nothing to delineate the boundaries between these two areas because there is nothing there. And that's very true for Alaska. It is mostly uninhabited. There's lots of beautiful wildlife and mountains and trees and snow, but not a lot of people or landmarks. The majority of people live primarily around the coast. Most people live in the city here of Anchorage. And that's mainly because it's the easiest to get to because you can actually drive to Anchorage. You cannot drive to the capital city of Juneau. You can see right here. You have to get there by boat or airplane because this area is so wild and so undeveloped that you just can't build roads to most of these places. There are roads, of course, but not a lot of places to build roads to be honest. Alaska borders the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Ocean by way of the Beaufort Sea up here, the Chukchi Sea, the Bering Sea, and the Gulf of Alaska down here. Alaska doesn't just have beautiful mountains and scenery and wildlife, it also has lots of gorgeous, gorgeous islands, the majority of which are mostly down here due to glaciation and all along the coast. But the Aleutian Islands are the most prominent island chain of Alaska. You can't see it all here. It continues on this map here, but I'll show you on Google Earth afterward. It stretches out almost all the way to Russia, which you can see right here is Russia. Here's the international date line too. That's Monday, that's Sunday. Very famously are the Diomede Islands that just very nearly touch Russia. There are two little islands. One belongs to Russia, one belongs to Alaska in the United States. I'll show you on Google Earth. It's a neat little border in the world. And yeah, for the most part, beautiful mountains, beautiful scenery. I don't know how else to describe the geography of Alaska. It's a whole lot of nothing. But what I can show you right now is the UNESCO World Heritage Sites within Alaska that are in this area here. It's a transboundary area that is also within most of British Columbia here, I think part of the Yukon as well. But this section here is full of the most incredible glaciers. So let me pull that up for you on my little tablet. There we go. So this property includes places in Canada, and the places in Alaska are Wrangell St. Elias and Glacier Bay. Let's read about it. These parks comprise an impressive complex of glaciers and high peaks on both sides of the border between Canada and the Yukon and British Columbia, and the United States and Alaska. These spectacular natural landscapes are home to many grizzly bears, caribou, and Dall's sheep. The site contains the largest non-polar ice field in the world. Let's look at some beautiful pictures of this area. Very haunting with all the gorgeous ice and this crystal blue water. I don't know how to describe it. There's some bears. And just a lovely, there's a seal. Lovely landscape, very rugged, very forested in some areas. Some whales in the water. There's a cool picture down here. The humpback looks like breaching. And some really spectacular glaciers as well. Really incredible sights to see. There's the big moraine, which is kind of it's not, but you could describe it as like the drainage area of the glacier. And they're just absolutely stunning. You can see in this photo, they're on a ship here, a tour ship, to look at this incredible glacier here. Just stores of frozen water so cold and so solid that it just builds up. It builds up. It builds up over so many millions of years. Really, really incredible. But I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to look at Google Earth later, and I'll show you more pictures of beautiful Alaska. Let's talk about the history of this place. Why is it so far away from the rest of the United States? Let's find out. So, Alaska is home to a very important part of human history, in particular, the human history of the Americas. In that once upon a time when this was all glaciers, all ice, this waterway did not exist. It was frozen over as a land bridge, and it's now known as the Bering Land Bridge. So peoples living in over here in what's now Russia followed the herds of caribou and woolly mammoths and what have you across the land bridge and into what's now Alaska. And they kept following those herds down into Canada and just kept traveling south and south and south and south until they reached the very tips of Argentina and Chile, populating the entire American continents. It all started right here. But there are still many native peoples that still live in Alaska that, stayed and adapted to this very harsh environment. Many different tribes. They're kind of one of the umbrella terms is Inuit, although it's not all of the peoples here are Inuit. The Inuit peoples live throughout Alaska, through northern Canada, and into Greenland. But there are many tribes that live in little pockets around the coastal areas and down here in Alaska, such as the Tlingits, the Tsimshian, the Haida, and the Yupik, among many others. Living very hunter-gatherer lives, fishing and hunting big animals and using those animals for clothes, shelter, and of course food, And that lifestyle existed for a very long time. It didn't really change until about the 18th century CE, of course. first non-native peoples to come here were the Russians for two reasons. One was that they were exploring the area. This was the era of exploration where there was a fascination with the Northwest Passage. Before it was the passage around the bottom of South America, which was charted but was very perilous. So the next question was, is there a route around the top of North America to reach Russia and Asia and eventually, like, China, Spice Islands, all that? The answer is yes, there is. Spoiler. The problem is that it's in the Arctic Ocean, and the majority of the Arctic Ocean is very frozen, very full of pack ice that you cannot sail through. So many people were trying to sail across the Arctic Ocean from this side, from the eastern coast, and were getting trapped in the ice, getting frozen in, and very unfortunate things were happening. So the Russians started to lead expeditions from the western side, trying to find a northern route. And in doing so, they found Alaska relatively quickly. The second reason was the fur trade. These first explorers came back to Russia with otter pelts, sea otter pelts, which was considered the finest pelts in the world, very waterproof, very thick, having to survive in these cold waters, you need some thick skin. So many Russians started coming into Alaska to hunt otters for their pelts. The Bering Sea is named after one of the first major, very famous explorers, Vitus Bering, or Vitus Bering, I've also heard, whichever one is correct in your language. The Bering Sea is obviously named after him, along with many other little islands and areas around here. The first permanent Russian settlement was in 1784. And they mainly, of course, stuck to the coastal areas. They kind of explored the islands, and I think there were a couple of settlements in the Aleutians, but I think they were mainly just temporary little areas, just set up to hunt sea otters during their peak season and then shipping it back to Russia. But what's interesting is that the Spanish also caught wind of the possible value up here in Alaska, and they started to build little settlements as well, which is how we there's like Valdez here and other kind of Spanish sounding areas, because Spain tried their hand at settling. It only lasted about 20-30 years or so before they're like, it's way too cold here, we are from Spain, we can't handle snow like this. So they booked it out of there and left it for the Russians. It would eventually become a colony known as Russian America, and their capital was in the town of Sitka. You can see right here. This is a very tiny map of Alaska, actually. There's a much bigger one, but it's like the size of my entire atlas, and my atlas is very big, so there's no way I would have to put my camera like on the ceiling for you to see all of it. And yeah, you guys get the tiny map, so sorry that some aspects are very teeny tiny. But yeah, it was doing pretty good at first, the colony, until they started losing money. It became not very profitable. It took a lot of effort to come here and hunt, and of course they forced many native peoples living here to work for them with no pay. You know what that is. And the Russians were bleeding money out of this colony. And they found a solution. In 1867, there was a senator down in the United States named William H. Seward. And he was really into whaling. Maybe he read Moby Dick or something and had some high ideas, some fantasies about whaling. But he liked to read about these northern, cold, Yukon kind of areas and was really fascinated by it. So when he found out that the Russians might be interested in dissolving their colony or even selling it, he sent them an offer. And I think at first the Russians were like, LOL, you're crazy. But once it was nearing the date that all of their contracts were going to be up in their little settlements, they were like, you know what? We can make a good amount of money off of the United States. So in 1867, Russia sold the area of Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million US, which is a lot of money today, but this was back in 1867. In today's money, that would be $141 million US. So not a bad bargain, right? Many Americans thought this was very silly. They called it Seward's folly. Like, what are we going to do with this huge territory that's just all ice and snow and bears and things like that? But that answer came quite quickly during the 1890s when gold was discovered up here, mainly in like these areas here. There was a big gold rush down in Canada a few decades before, and they were following the rivers up to see if they could find any more, and sure enough they did, and it was right in America's brand new backyard of Alaska. So many people came from the United States and all over the world for the Yukon Gold Rush in Alaska and Canada. That lasted until about the 1910s. World War I kind of, killed everyone's vibe in a lot of different ways. But many of the towns that you see down here in the south were formed during this gold rush, including the city of Juneau, which was hoppin' during its prime. It had a huge population to the point where it became more important than Sitka, so the capital was moved over. More space to build official buildings and all of that. But after the gold rush, most people left and the populations took a nosedive. And even today, I think it's the third least populated U.S. state and the most sparsely populated U.S. state. Not a lot of people live in Alaska. But from what I understand, those that do are super proud of it. There's a lot of pride in Alaska. Alaska then was considered not very important to the Americans until World War II, when, these islands are actually very close to Japan. And in fact, Japan started to occupy some of these islands over here, take them over, and did what the Japanese did when they invaded and took over places. So technically, Japan did invade and occupy the United States during World War II. It was just these islands over here, though, mainly Attu and various others. So Alaska became sort of a priority, and the military was like, well, we need to beef up the security in Alaska and make it safe for the Americans that live there. So more and more attention was brought there. The people living here were like, you know what, if you're going to bring so much attention and protection to Alaska, you should just make us a state. And people weren't really sure about that, but it finally passed through Congress, and Alaska became the 49th state of the United States on January 3rd, 1959. A couple of little minor things have happened in Alaska since then. Number one is definitely the oil boom. Oil was discovered down here and began to be vastly exploited, as the United States would rightly do with their own oil, much to the chagrin of the people here concerned with the environment, because drilling for oil is not very environmentally friendly, especially after an event in 1989 known as the Exxon Valdez spill, where I think it was one of the largest oil spills in history and absolutely devastated the environment down here. Thankfully, it's all cleaned up now. It's like you would have never known, but I actually remember this happening. Like, I'm old, okay? But I was maybe, let's see, I would have been 4 years old when this happened. But I have very clear memories of Alaska oil spill. I was always a weird kid who loved geography, and I liked to watch the news, and I remember seeing pictures of all the wildlife and ducks and things covered in oil and people trying to save their lives before they suffocated. And just the quality of the water and how absolutely devastating it was. The oil industry is still going strong in Alaska. They've obviously learned a lot of lessons since the Exxon Valdez spill, but that threat is always there, you know. A completely different type of disaster occurred in Alaska in 1964 when an absolutely huge earthquake, I didn't write it down, but I think it was like a 9.4 on the Richter scale earthquake struck Alaska. And obviously the people here were not prepared for that or for the tsunamis that occurred afterward. It devastated a lot of areas, but also, like the oil spill, those areas have recovered and been rebuilt and are much safer. But I think it's like the third or fourth strongest earthquake ever recorded since earthquakes began being recorded. Pretty intense. It is still the Ring of Fire, you know. Lots of these mountains aren't just mountains, they're volcanic. A lot of these islands are little volcanoes. It's really cool to see on Google Earth. So why don't we pull that out and see how it looks on Google Earth. Let me fire it up real quick. Clear UNESCO out the way and get to Google Earth. There we go. Okay. I can't really see the viewfinder from my angle, but doing my best. Alaska, let's look at the slideshow. There's those gorgeous glaciers that we saw before. The quaint little towns here. It's all still very kind of late 1800s style in some places, very gold rushy, you know. Lots of little quaint seaside areas, little wharf areas, and lots of little rustic lodging kind of areas. There's a cruise ship. There's a big industry in Alaskan tourism, mainly in cruises. This is at Kenai Fjords, which I might show you because that's one of the places that I'd want to go the most in Alaska, and I'll show you why. A little boomtown architecture there, kind of an almost Nordic, but not quite. Architecture there, beautiful glaciers, beautiful waters. You see the ice chunks floating in the water. A lot of these are repeats. They've made it. I love the bright. I think of Nordic because of the colors. You know, the colors that they paint the buildings. America. So let's check it out. Why don't we start with the Aleutians? So when you zoom into these islands, first of all, like, hold on, let me show you like just how far it really spreads out. There's Ottu, the farthest one. And look how close it is to Russia, the Kamchatka Peninsula over here. And you can see it's on this mountain range that goes like that, the Ring of Fire that makes up Japan and all of the islands north of Japan and south of Russia. And when you look close, you can really tell that these are little mountains, and all the land around it is old volcanic spread that they would have once upon a time erupted. What if there's pictures of this one? There's not, unfortunately. All islands that were once bursting out of the seafloor and erupting and making all of this land around it. How interesting is that? The main indigenous group here are the Aleuts, hence the name Aleutian Islands. Here's the Katmai National Park, one of the most visited because it's right on the coast. Look at the bears, how cute. Looking for some salmon, looking for a little snack. You can take this little craft here to fly around and land on the water so you can see these magnificent views and the sweet bears. Oh my gosh, how cute. And this beautiful scenery with the big glacier back there. Absolutely stunning, stunning wildlife, isn't it? I want to show you. Oh my gosh, I love the bears. I think they're so cute. Don't ever want to see one up close, but I think they're adorable. Let's look at, I need to get in closer, I think, to find, just looking at that. I want to find Fjords to show you. I know you're down here somewhere. There's no forest, and you can see this ice shield here. Thought it was over here. I've lost the Fjords. I found it. Fjords. So there's only so many places you can find real fjords. You've got Norway, of course, New Zealand. I'm pretty sure there's some in Canada, and here in Alaska, there's a big glacier right there. Look at the moraine go. How beautiful is that? So, so incredible. There it goes. I would love to go see the fjords and the glaciers here. Look at this landscape. Just absolutely barren, frozen everywhere. Fjords are areas where, oh how pretty, the water rushing down from the mountains. Areas where the water creeps in around the land here very, very deeply and making these big channels and these big rocky formations. You can see down here the fjords. And look, there's Seward. There's a lot of places called Seward around Alaska for obvious reasons, as you now know. Let's check out Juneau. I'm gonna have to find it first. I'm going into British Columbia. I've gone way too far. Goodness gracious, I'm gonna listen. Oh, there's Glacier Bay that we looked at on UNESCO. There's Sitka, which means Juneau is right up here. Not a very large city, especially for a capital city, is it? But that's because you have this crazy landscape. Look at these moraines. Oh my goodness. Very choppy Google Earth pictures there, but yeah. I've lost it. It's down here. Juneau, Alaska. The capital city of Alaska. There's that quaint boomtown architecture. I think we saw a lot of these photos already in the slideshow. There is this cool humpback whale statue, though, in a park there. That's pretty neat, pretty epic. But yeah, beautiful hiking you can imagine around Juneau, looking at all those waterfalls. We could look at glaciers all day. They're very beautiful, very haunting. Something about them is just very, like, quiet and still, you know, in a very respectful, beautiful way. But let's head up the coast here. We can look at, let's see, a lot of these places don't have pictures, which, I mean, there's nothing there, you know. There's not much there to show you. Here's Denali National Park. I probably should have mentioned this in the geography section. Denali is the highest mountain in North America. A lot of people still know it as Mount McKinley. Apparently, when the first Europeans saw it, President McKinley was running for president. He wasn't even president then. And decided to name it after him for like a campaign slogan. Look at this crystal clear water. The video you're going to see tomorrow about Alaska, I filmed a week ago, and I was like, I don't know why they named it that. But I know now. I went and found out after that video. But yeah, the highest mountain in North America, Denali. Look at the tall sheep. Very cute. Very, very rustic. But it's been known as Denali by the indigenous peoples here, and they campaigned to rename it, and they won. So it's no longer named after President McKinley. It's named the name it always has been named. Bering Land Bridge National Reserve. You can see all the you could see all the reserves up here for a minute. All the various reserves. I don't know if there's any pictures of. Oh my goodness, isn't that not gorgeous? That is absolutely stunning. Oh wow. Beautiful Alaska. I love it. There's a seaplane. Big jagged peaks. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah, I lied. I said there's not a lot of photos of the other places, and then I see that. But let's see. Oh, I promised to show you the Diomedes. So here's the Diomede Islands. This one is, oh goodness. That's the best Google Earth has for us. That's Little Diomede. That's the United States. This is, I guess, Big Diomede. Yep. And that's Russia. So yeah, that's the closest border between the United States and any other foreign country other than like Canada and Mexico. You know, countries that don't touch each other. That's the closest one. You might think it's Cuba. It's actually Russia because of that. Here's the city of Nome, which first, before we get to Nome, I have to show you Anchorage, which is Anchorage, right here. Anchorage being, look how absolutely huge this city is. I think it's like the largest city in the United States by area, because I mean, look at that. So the city of Anchorage, by far the most populous area in Alaska. But this is where the, oh gorgeous, where the Iditarod dog sled race begins. And they mush these dogs all the way up to Nome. And there's a little sign here you can see. End of the Iditarod sled dog race, 1,049 miles. Anchorage to Nome. I don't know what else Nome is known for. I only know it because of the Iditarod. But, I don't know, I always pictured the Iditarod just kind of being like here to here, you know? I didn't realize it was so far across the state. It is a long race. Kudos to those amazing dogs for pulling that off. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how this area up here just seems so rocky and not covered in snow most of the time, and then you head down to here at the ice caps where it's always covered in snow. Surely there's a geological reason why that is. But I'm sure in the winter time this is just absolutely blasted with snow, right? Let's see if there's pictures here. Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, like, it's remarkable how this landscape is just not always snow. Because it's up in the Arctic Circle, right? Oh my gosh, it's polar bears. Oh my goodness. I love it. Yeah, you'd think it would just look like this 24/7, 365. But, look at the reindeer. Or, did you know, I've just learned this recently, that caribou and reindeer are the same thing? It's just in North America they're called caribou, and in Europe they're called reindeer. Blew my freaking mind. Oh my goodness, look at the person there and how empty everything is. Oh, sweet little fox. It's so cute. Rushing waters. That's surely during the winter time, right? And during the springtime when it all melts. A walrus. Oh, big chunky. And I'm sure during the summer it's all abloom and alive, right? Then the snow creeps back up in autumn. And you could take a helicopter to go look at all of the beauty. Very cool. So yeah, I'm going to end it there for tonight, because we could just be looking at Google Earth for hours upon hours. I highly encourage you to explore Alaska if you've never been there in person to see it. We never looked at Fairbanks. There's Fairbanks. It's another big city. But, spring, winter. Another big city in Alaska. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content, please consider subscribing. If you thought this landscape is beautiful, just wait. Next, we are going to Canada. And the pictures I have to show you there are absolutely stunning. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good night. Good night. Good night.